So what I want to do this morning is I want to talk to you a little bit about that increasingly problematic question when we're reading is to print or not to print. And this has come about because, of course, we have so many avenues now for reading on screen. If I start with my own experience, what I find is that when I'm reading and I want to think more deeply about something, so I have a particular journal article that I want to engage with more richly, then despite my best intentions, I go and print. And in fact, even though I travel a fair bit and like to do research when I'm traveling, I tend to carry heavy chunks of paper around. And the question is, why do I do that? Is it habit? Am I showing my age? But no, I think there is more to it than that. And there is a lot of opinions out there and also a bit of research. And the research supports some of my actions. The big question is, when we read on screen, how does it actually change our reading practice? Does it change how we make sense of the text? The growing literature suggests a few things to keep in mind when you're trying to decide about whether you should read on screen or not. And the first thing is that reading on screen, surprisingly, tends to be slower. People can read faster when they read paper text. The other thing to keep in mind is that some research is showing that it is more difficult to make deep meaning from digital texts. So when you're reading on your computer screen or on your tablet, it is in fact a little bit harder for you to read for that kind of heavy thinking work. This may be due to the fact that we have more difficulty navigating a digital text. So this of course depends on the quality of the software you have, but when you are trying to move around a text, it is often much more difficult on screen. Plus, many interruptions, hyperlinks, etc. can take you all over the place, and the research has shown that people reading online tend to wander more than those reading a paper copy. There is also the question of fatigue, and this is very clear too, that you do tend to get more tired reading on screens. That could be just about your ergonomics, how your office is set up, what quality screen you have, etc. But to all intents and purposes, reading on screen and reading on paper make only those differences. The other key difference is how you go about your reading practice. And this brings me back to my big bugbear. I think the best way to read well is to not only read with a clear purpose in mind, but to make sure you read actively. And in that sense, the advice is then that you should try and develop reading skills both in the digital domain and on paper that are all about making you a much more active reader. So if I was going to read digitally, and believe me, I have tried, so I don't have to carry all that paper about, what I've done is I have found some softwares that work for me. Because I think if you can read on screen with the capacities to annotate, to make notes as you go, to make questions on your text, this makes a big difference to how you are able to read. So I think it's not good if you're reading passively on a computer screen, unless you're trying to type notes as you went, or unless you're doing other strategies to stay as awake and active as you can. So as I said, I found a number of ways to be able to annotate text, to go back to my notes, to keep me alert when I'm reading. I think the fundamental difference when you're deciding is how much you need to think about a given text. The longer something is, of course, the harder it is to navigate about when it's on screen, and the easier it is to navigate when it's paper copy. And that's a crucial thing to keep in mind. So having said all of that, I think you need to be aware of what you're trying to do with the reading and then make an informed decision about whether it will be okay to read it on screen or better to read it in print.